This is part 6 to Charlie's story. It's entitled Cricket's Creek.
Cricket's Creek, February 23rd, 2018, Friday. "This was a good idea," Billy began, "although my butt is going to have to get used to riding on horseback again. I haven't ridden since I joined the Navy 40 years ago." Charlie laughed. "I gave you a chance. You could have ridden on the mule, Kawasaki, with Zach. Elliot looks like he's right at home on Nellie back there." "Nellie seems to be a good horse," Elliot responded, referring to his ride for the day. "How's your horse, Eli?" "Hey, this Indian can outride you cowboys all day long," Eli laughed, referring to his Native American heritage. After setting up camp, the men wasted no time putting their fly fishing skills to the test. Charlie was right. This was the perfect time for catching speckled and rainbow trout. "Man, this is great." Zach was standing hip deep in the crisp, cold water of Cricket's Creek. Perfect weather and perfect waters. Now we could just get these fish to go along with the plan. "Hey, I told you this would be perfect. I was in charge of the weather and bringing the fish," Charlie answered. "Catching them is up to you." The others laughed. The fishing was a success. As evening fell and temperatures began to drop, the men gathered around their robust campfire for a serious conversation. Billy, Zach, and Elliot had discussed Charlie's circumstances and brought messages that they hoped would help. "Charlie," Billy began the conversation, "we didn't all go to the same churches, but all of us are Christians, and we truly believe that God is in control. We think maybe He's trying to get a message to you." "I've been trying to figure that out," Charlie replied. "My life has not always been easy, but I feel like I've been very blessed. I lost my mom as a child, and my dad died too young. We have weathered the ups and downs that any other rancher normally experiences. Droughts, storms, vacillating beef prices, feed shortages, fuel prices, car trouble, and normal sickness and diseases. But the past 8 years have been a nightmare," Charlie continued. "It feels like I'm under a vicious attack by an unknown enemy." "Charlie," Elliot began, "we have not talked a lot since we went our separate ways out of high school. We shared a special bond back then, and I have always considered you a close friend." "Of course," Charlie nodded in agreement. "You also know that I am not a seminary-trained preacher," Elliot continued, "but I believe in my heart something is going on in your life that is spiritual in origin. This is more than simply bad luck. Would you agree?" "Without a doubt," Charlie answered. "I believe that God is in control, but right now, I can't seem to find any answers." "Charlie," Elliot continued, "as a friend, I feel like I need to say some things that you might not want to hear." Charlie lowered his head and quietly pushed back his hat as he listened carefully to what his friend was trying to say. Elliot continued, "Charlie, you have always been good with words. People have always respected you for your wisdom and advice. But now that the trials are mounting, you are growing impatient, waiting for answers. God has always been your source of strength. First and foremost," Elliot continued, "God has a purpose and a plan. A few weeks back, I was listening to a sermon on television, and I thought about your situation. This preacher said something pretty profound. He said, it's important to remember that our health and wealth are reflections of our own righteousness. They are a sign of God's favor. When we suffer, they are signs of His displeasure. Charlie, there's a reason for your suffering. God doesn't allow the innocent to suffer, and people who are evil always reap the consequences of their sins. In your case, you just need to find that answer and deal with it. That will put you right with God and end this suffering." "Don't you think I've considered that?" Charlie responded. "It feels like the arrows of God have pierced my heart and soul. He has given me poison to drink. and his power is aligned against me. I'm not complaining without reason. Even wild animals cry out when they have no food. Charlie, I'm trying to answer those cries for help, Elliot continued. Can any mortal man be right and pure in the presence of God? Even a foolish man will eventually curse the house that he himself has built. Adversity does not spring up from the dust. A man will experience trouble unless he is faithful to God. God wants his people to be healthy, wealthy, and happy all the time, Elliot continued. We have the power to make things happen. God will answer your prayers for help if and only if your faith is strong enough to move him. Charlie, God is waiting on you. If I were in your shoes, Elliot's voice was growing stronger, I would commit my cause to God and ask him to show me where I have failed him. Failed him? Charlie asked out of sheer frustration. At that, Charlie stood up and walked toward the creek. Lord, I don't need this right now. I know he means well, but he choked back the tears and a bit of anger as he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Eli. Charlie, if you want me to leave you alone, I will. Just know that I'm here for you. Eli spoke words of comfort to his old friend and mentor. I'll be okay, Eli, Charlie responded. I know he's trying to help, but his choice of words are about as comfortable as a barbed wire belt. As he returned to the fireside, Charlie spoke directly to Elliot. I have prayed for answers. Now I just wish that God would go ahead and finish me off. I wish he would crush me and cut me off. With no real answers, I think I would even find comfort in pain. I have not walked away from God, Charlie continued. I have not denied his holy word. I simply have no strength. I can see no end for patience. What am I waiting for? Patience for what? His voice was growing stronger as his frustrations continued. What do you want from me? Charlie asked rhetorically. You see what I'm going through, and you have no answers. I have not asked you for anything. You can't deliver me from my adversary. I challenge you. Charlie's agitation was beginning to show. Teach me, and I will be silent. Give me specifics. Tell me how I've gone astray. You speak as if you know. You are convinced that I am wrong, but your words are empty. Charlie, I wasn't... Elliot tried to interrupt. I know, Elliot. Charlie held up his hand to stop him. Speaking more calmly, he acknowledged Elliot's intentions. I shouldn't get frustrated with you. I'm sorry. Charlie sat back down by the fire, and with a calm voice, he spoke from his heart. Most men live out their lives struggling to make ends meet. In many ways, he feels like a hired hand, still struggling for his wages. At other times, he feels like a slave who is waiting for shade to relieve him from the heat. Up until a few years ago, I felt more than blessed. Now I am allotted months of emptiness. At night, I dread the sleep. I toss and turn all night, waiting for another day without hope. My skin has grown hard and scarred from all of the blemishes. Here I am bringing my complaint to friends who can offer no hope. I am speaking from the bitterness of my soul. You tell me to rest, but I fear the dreams that are waiting for me. Guys, I'm sorry. I just need some time to myself. He walked back down to the large rock by the creek and sat down. Charlie prayed out of sheer desperation with both hands cupped around his face. God, who am I that you even care about me? You are with me every day, and sometimes you seem to be a friend, and at other times you attempt to destroy me. When will the testing and trials end? When will you just turn away from me and leave me alone? God, why have you made me your mark? Why have you placed a target on my back? Why have I suddenly become a burden to you? Why won't you cleanse me from whatever I have done wrong? God, I have no answers. Charlie continued to sit by the creek, trying to regain his composure, when Billy walked up behind him. Charlie, maybe Elliot is saying the right things, but in the wrong way. All of us want you to recover from this. We believe the answers are within reach, but we don't know what's in your heart that may have caused your prayers to hit a wall. Did you know, Charlie interrupted, that the bank is threatening foreclosure on our property? I have just a few weeks to make a payment on the land, or we might lose what Dad and I worked so hard to build. Charlie, I didn't know, Billy responded. But I think it's important to get some answers. I believe God wants to bless all of us, but sometimes our motives and sinful desires get in the way. Please, Charlie, Billy continued, seek God with all of your heart. Plead with him for mercy. If you are pure and upright, he will restore you, and he will protect your home and your family. Do you really believe that, Billy? Charlie looked his friend in the eyes. God does not take the side of evil men, but he will never reject a righteous man. Billy spoke with confidence. John 15 says that, we will ask for anything you wish, and you shall have it. Billy was quoting from John chapter 15, verse 7. So you think it's that simple? Charlie countered. I don't think it's that simple, Charlie, Billy answered. But I think Jesus made us a promise, and when our prayers are not answered, we have to look inside ourselves to find out where we crossed the line. Billy, God took my children away from me, Charlie answered. This stupid disease can't compare with that. I am fully aware, Charlie continued. All men have a sin nature. That is true of me. I know I am not totally innocent, but I am trying. If I am being judged through a microscope, how can I be right with God? Can anyone be right with God? He alone is the judge. Charlie continued looking straight into Billy's face. If anyone wants to argue with God, they wouldn't have a chance. They couldn't answer him once in 1,000 times. God is wise and powerful. Who has hardened his heart toward God and succeeded? He can remove the mountains and shake the foundations of the earth. God commands the sun to rise and set. He is the one who stretched out the heavens and commanded the seas. Look up at the sky and count the stars. We think we can understand their purpose by giving them names like Leo, Virgo, Orion, the Big Dipper, and the one that looks like a bull. Charlie's tone of voice was changing. How can I ask him to explain this to me? Charlie asked rhetorically. I can't make him turn back his anger toward me. I have done nothing wrong, but I have no standing from which to plead my case. Even if he answered me with a booming voice, I am not sure that I will believe he was listening to me. Charlie, I don't think you are right, Billy attempted to interrupt. Charlie completely ignored Billy as he continued. God has crushed the life out of me. The hits just keep on coming without end. He won't even let me catch a breath. I know I am better. If this is a battle of strength, I have no chance. If this is about justice, who can override him? Even in my defense, he has the power to use my own words to condemn me. Charlie's voice became softer but more sarcastic. I don't have any good days anymore. Just momentary breaks from the nightmare. God is not like a man that I can contend with. There is no arbiter who will see my side of the argument. At this point, Zach and Eli walked up on their conversation. Can we join you? Sure, Charlie answered. Billy's just listening to me gripe and whine. Is Elliot avoiding me now? Elliot will be okay, Zach answered. He knows you're hurting. He just wants to give you some space. You know, Zach, Charlie spoke calmly, you guys may think I have not been searching for answers. In my prayers, I have simply asked God to stop long enough to reveal his reasons for the continual attacks. A short, catastrophic event in a man's life can take the breath out of him, but it gets deeper and more painful if you can't stop to recover and catch your breath. I'm not the only man who has ever buried his children, but at least allow me to grieve without the daily drumbeat of other trials and pains, Charlie concluded. The depth of my pain is compounded by the long-term compounding of other pains. It just goes on, one after another after another. Charlie's voice trailed off. None of the others had anything left to say. Saturday morning, February 24th, 2018. Saturday. It was a cold, crisp Saturday morning on Crickets Creek, with temperatures reaching the low 30s. The conversation from the night before had increased Charlie's frustration. He had always tried to find the good in other people, intended to give them the benefit of the doubt when their choice of words brought more pain than comfort. Awakening before the others, Charlie quietly stirred the coals from the night before, and the campfire came back to life. He opened his Bible to Jeremiah 17 and began reading. He found it hard to focus on the message and its context. There were messages to the faithful and messages to the evildoers. Charlie was trying to figure out which category applied to him. Unable to entirely focus on the message, Charlie left the warmth of the morning fire and wandered down by the creek. Bandit was more than happy to follow him. You know, Bandit, the book of Jeremiah was written to an unfaithful nation. Charlie took his seat on a large rock and continued to read. God is telling them that he was going to take away Judah's heritage and turn them over to their enemies. Verse 5 says that people who trust in their own flesh are cursed. Charlie continued, Is this where Elliot thinks I am in my own faith? Am I failing to trust God? Have I been trusting in my own hands and not God? Verse 10 says that God searches the mind and heart. Charlie continued to read. Maybe that's where I am missing the boat. With that, Charlie could not continue reading. He tried to find personal application to what he was reading. He was caught between the frustration and now the guilt for an as yet undefined sin that might be the source of all his pain. Charlie whispered a quiet prayer that came from the depths of his pain and the sincerity of the confusion that was cutting into the foundations of his faith. He bowed his head. Dear Lord, I am so tired of this life. Even in the midst of my pain, you have sent friends to condemn me, and I don't understand. Please hear my bitter complaint. I feel like you are directing your anger and judgment against me. Please, I beg you to tell me. What are the charges against me? Is it right for you to be so cruel to me? Why do you despise what you made with your own hands? How can you look the other way or even bless the actions of people who are far more wicked than I? Even though I am not aware of any grievous sin on my part, you seem to track down every single sin or fault I have, and then deal ruthlessly with me for each and every one. Lord, I am not guilty, and you know that. But there is no one to rescue me from you. Your hands formed and shaped me, and now those same hands have returned to destroy me. You formed me from clay, but you have decided to crush me back to dust. You blessed my father in my conception, and you nurtured me in my mother's womb. You took her away when I was young. You formed my body and gave me a wonderful father who raised Lizzie and me. For most of my life, you have cared for me and shown me constant love, and that love has given me my reason for living. Were all those years just a show? For all of those years, were you just setting me up for your own plans to destroy me? What is the grace that is spoken of so often in your word? Are you watching my every action and looking for any sin you can withhold your forgiveness? Do you hold me accountable for every sin, and when I do something right, do you give me no credit? Now, in addition to my grief, fear, and pain, you have made me miserable in my shame. You hunt me down like a lion. Now, you have recruited witnesses against me to continue your next plan of attack. Father, I know that my words and attitude toward you are not consistent with what I have learned from my childhood. My mind tells me to believe in you and your infinite love and grace, but my gut tells me something entirely different. Charlie's words simply trailed off as he noticed a hawk sitting on a limb across the creek. Charlie managed to speak to this majestic bird. I see you're planning for breakfast this morning. You have some really nice entrees to choose from, young lady. At that moment, the hawk focused on her target, and within seconds, she hit the cold water and went back onto her limb. A large speckled trout was wrestling unsuccessfully to free himself from the hawk's powerful talons. Bandit barked in recognition of the hawk's skill. I know how you feel. Charlie looked up at the desperate fish. Sometimes you are the predator. Today, you are the prey. I guess that about summed it all up. The other men were beginning to wake up and made their way around the fire that Charlie had started. Seeing Charlie down by the creek, Zach decided to go down and check on him. Charlie staggered as he tried to stand up. The pain was pretty severe this morning, but nothing more than he had felt before. Seeing Charlie struggle, Zach came to his aid. Charlie, if you are not up to this, we can head back to the house, he offered. Thanks, Zach. That won't be necessary. I will be in the same shape there, Charlie responded. It looks like the fish are ready to cooperate with us this morning. I would hate for you guys to miss out. I'm just going to try and take it easy this morning. As they moved back up the trail, Charlie caught the pleasant smell of bacon coming from the campfire. It brought back some great memories that gave him a short break in his painful thoughts. Looking at Zach, Charlie commented, "There's something different about breakfast on a cold morning by a campfire, you know." "That's true," Zach answered. "I could use more of this for sure. It seems that we get so busy doing life that we often forget to live it." Breakfast conversation was light as the men complimented Billy on his cooking skills. It was as if no one wanted to revisit the conversation from the night before. Following the breakfast, they made their way down to the creek. As the other men stepped out into the cold stream, Charlie and Bandit found themselves a comfortable place to watch them. After an hour or so, Zach walked back to where Charlie was sitting. "Charlie, I haven't said much," he began. "You don't seem to want to hear what Billy and Elliot are trying to get you to understand. You are in pain, and you have suffered a lot. We don't deny that. But there's a straightforward path out of this that you are not seeing. I wish I could see that path as well as they think they can," Charlie responded. "Charlie, you keep proclaiming your innocence. You say that you are clean in God's eyes." Zach spoke confidently. "If we can't get through to you, I wish God would speak to you directly. He would tell you how merciful he has been. He would probably tell you that you deserve far more. Charlie, God sees the iniquity in a man's heart," Zach continued. "He knows when a man is worthless. If you will stretch out your hand toward him, put away the sin in your heart, I have no doubt that he will make you forget your misery, and your life will be brighter than the midday sun. You will no longer feel the way you feel." "Sorry, Zach," Charlie responded. "I just don't see it your way. I really do wish God would come here and speak with me directly. There is no one without sin, but I didn't deserve this." Overhearing part of the conversation, the other three men put down their gear and walked over to join the conversation. Charlie looked at each one and turned back to Zach. "I try to tell myself that you each mean well, but right now, I feel like you are measuring my every word and waiting to pounce when I say something wrong. God allows evil men to go free. No consequences." Charlie spoke quietly. "But God has all knowledge, and he has all power. What he decides to tear down, no one can rebuild. When he shuts a man in, no one can set him free. He commands the droughts and causes the floods. He builds kingdoms, and he takes them down. He makes nations great, and he can destroy them with just a word. Fellas, I've had a strong relationship with God for a long time," Charlie asserted. "I would rather argue my case before him than with each of you." "Charlie, none of us are trying to pass judgment on you," Billy interjected. "Yet you continue to speak for God as if you have all the answers," Charlie came back. "Why don't you allow me to speak without assuming you know the answers?" "I'm willing to answer any charges against me," Charlie continued. "So far, you have chosen to believe I am guilty. You have urged me to confess and repent, But you can't tell me what I am guilty of. I have no problem arguing my case before God. Charlie's voice became more assertive. Let him speak to me. Let him bring his charges against me. Even if he destroys me, I will place my trust in him. At that point, Charlie's hands began to shake. Eli, who had remained silent throughout all of this, placed his hand on Charlie's shoulder. Looking at the others, he asked them to give Charlie some space. Can you guys just leave him alone for a while? At that, Charlie and Eli simply sat quietly together for quite a while. Putting his hand on Bandit, Eli turned to Charlie. This guy's been your friend for a long time, hasn't he? I think he's pushing 11 years old, Charlie answered. We found him at the animal shelter in Manhattan when he was just a pup. He jumped up in my lap and looked me on the face, and it was all over. He's been by my side ever since. If you can help me get up, Charlie finished. Think I'm ready to throw a line in the water. You got it, Eli responded. Let's see if we can teach these guys a thing or two about catching fish. The remainder of the morning, the conversation shifted back to the fish in Cricket's Creek. The sky was clear, and the weather forecast was for windy conditions with an expected high in the mid-30s. It was perfect weather for trout and comfortable for Charlie, as warmer weather exacerbated his skin irritations. I guess my body has gotten used to this Southern California weather, Billy commented. I've been away so long, I forgot what standing in the creek in 30-degree weather could do to a man's body, especially with the Kansas winds. Everyone laughed as Zach chimed in. Looks like your fishing skills have gotten a little rusty too. Charlie, how are you doing over there? I'm right where I need to be right now, Charlie answered. The water feels good, and I can still outfish all of you combined. Do you really think so? Take a look at this, Eli laughed, holding up a stringer full of freshly caught trout. Okay, Charlie responded. It's pretty hard to compete with Eli when it comes to fishing. I really miss our time together when you were growing up. Guys, Claire packed us some of her famous homemade chili for our lunch, Charlie announced. I'm going to go warm it up. I will call you when it is ready. Charlie was struggling, and he needed an excuse to be alone for a few minutes. He stoked the campfire and set the pot of chili on it. As he sat by the fire, he began to think about the many events in his life and the bizarre turn of events that brought him to this moment. Charlie placed his hand on Bandit's back. Remember all the times we used to go fishing, little buddy? You were just a pup back then. Jesse and Caleb didn't share our love for fishing, but Taylor, Wes, and Lucy wouldn't miss a chance to be here if they could. Charlie looked up at the clear blue Kansas sky. Father, I don't understand how you could have given me so much, only to take it away. When you open your eyes to see me, what is it that makes you want to bring judgment down on me? You have numbered my days, Charlie continued. You have assigned limits that we cannot pass. Why won't you simply look away from me so that I can live out my life without incident or fanfare? Trees have hope. Even if they are cut down, they will sprout again, Charlie observed. But a man has only one life to live. Whether he has much or little, his life is over when he lies down for the last time. If this is the life that you have left for me, at least let it be short. Let me find peace in the coldness of the grave. Please, God, I am begging you. Let your wrath toward me be finished and over with. At that point, the others made their way over to join Charlie by the warm fire and to enjoy Claire's chili. As they were finishing their meal, Elliot spoke to Charlie. My pastor did a whole sermon series on the importance of fearing God. Not because he's angry, but a wholesome fear that leads to faith. Sometimes our prayers are not answered, Elliot continued, because we approach God in the wrong way. We speak to him out of our sin, and he turns his head away. My preacher called it the hindering of our prayers and meditations. We have to remember that God has promised blessings of health and prosperity. Zach stepped into the conversation, but only if our hearts are aligned with his. if we turn away from our idols and obey him, we will inherit all kinds of blessings. Charlie, it's time for you to take a hard look in the mirror. Elliot continued his message. Listen to what you are saying. Do you think you are so wise and righteous to avoid God's hand of discipline? You are so caught up in your own self-righteousness, you can't recognize the darkness in your own heart. Zach's voice became more assertive. Think about it. Are you shaking your fist at God? Charlie, that's not right. That's the attitude of wicked men. God's punishment of the wicked is swift, certain, and it can last a long time. Think about the pain you're experiencing. If you were innocent, do you really think God would allow the pain to continue? At that moment, Charlie stood up, rubbed his eyes, and turned away from his accusers. Clenching his fists, he spoke to them in frustration. Zach, Elliot, I brought you here to fish. We are on a property where my dad and I have worked for almost all of my life. Right now, I am facing the prospect of losing my lifestyle and my home. I have buried my 5 children in this ordeal. My face and body are covered with scars and blemishes. You have no idea what's in my heart. Charlie turned around and faced the others. I have searched and prayed for answers and have found none. Now, you come here and add your accusations to a man who was already serving a painful prison sentence for, as yet, unknown crimes that you have no knowledge of. When it comes to comfort and encouragement, Charlie charged them, you are miserable comforters. You continue to open my wounds and rub salt in them. Regardless of your intent to help, Charlie continued, you don't have a clue what is in my heart. You don't know anything about my prayers. I may not have all of the answers, but this I do know. God has completely worn me down. Whether it's for wrath or some other reason, he has ripped me from limb to limb. You are adding pain to a man who has endured immeasurable pain. Charlie's voice was shaking. 5 years ago, I was active in my church. I was a good father to my children. All of them actively served Christ. 5 years ago, people respected me. 5 years ago, I was living a contented life. Now my life is a wreck, and I have no more tears to shed. But hear and understand me. Charlie's voice was firm and uncompromising. At no time have I ever shaken my fist at God. My prayers have been sincere. Look, Charlie, Zach attempted to interrupt. I'm not finished, Zach. Charlie stopped him in mid-sentence. I heard you tell me that I won't listen to your words of wisdom. You say that I will only listen to myself. But it is you who have closed your hearts to me. You are so self-assured that God would not allow these problems unless I deserve them. Do you think I'm as evil as Charles Manson or Adolf Hitler? Maybe Satan himself. Right now, the only logical end to this pain is in the grave itself. Charlie's voice trailed off. Charlie, we haven't chosen our words very well. Billy spoke carefully. We can't answer with specifics, but we want this to end well for you. You know a lot about the Bible and what it says, but don't make the mistake of thinking that we are stupid either. Without knowing where you got off track, we know for certain that God deals firmly and quickly with the unrighteous, and you don't want to go there. So you have lumped me in with the wicked men who deserve harsh judgment from God? Charlie asked sarcastically. You can't name my crimes, but apparently I am no longer fit for God's favor. Tell me, if you can. Charlie looked straight into Billy's eyes. How long do you intend to keep this up? I'm standing before you as a friend who is in a great deal of pain, and all you can do is torture me with words and platitudes. Is it too much for me to ask of you, my friends, Charlie motioned with air quotes, to show a little mercy? To show some compassion? You have no idea how badly I wish that my story was written in a book for all to see. Not just the journey I have traveled, but also the injustice I have experienced at the hands of others. I can't answer or understand all of the questions running through my mind right now. Charlie looked up at the sky. I may never satisfy your accusations, but this I do know. I know that my Redeemer is alive, and he stands ready to speak on my behalf. Whether he comes to rescue me soon or after I've turned into dust, I know that he will speak. We're missing out on some good fishing, Charlie declared as he and Bandit started down the trail to Cricket's Creek. The others were silent as Charlie walked away. Bandit, do you think I'm a bad guy? Do you? Charlie spoke to his special friend. Bandit's wagging tail and facial expression gave Charlie the encouragement he needed for now. I don't know, Bandit, Charlie continued. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am missing something. I certainly don't have any answers. I keep crying out to God, but it is like he has trapped me in his net. I cry out for justice and then for mercy, but I can't find either. God has walled me in like a caged animal. I keep pacing back and forth, looking for a door or even a crack in the bars. I came out here with some friends who I thought could provide some comfort and encouragement, but even they have turned their backs on me. They talk about me. They talk at me, but they have made no attempt to see the depth of my hopelessness. Charlie picked up a stick from the trail. Hey, buddy, are you in the mood to play some fetch? Bandit was getting older, but he still loved to play with Charlie at every chance. As Charlie attempted to throw the stick down the trail, he felt the pain in his shoulder and in his lungs. Dropping to his knees, he whispered his prayer. Dear God, search my heart and show me the truth. Am I being disciplined for something evil inside of me? They seem to be sure that you are taking out your wrath in me. I didn't believe that was remotely true, but now I'm not sure. I just know that I was in pain, emotionally, mentally, and physically, before they came here. Now, fear, frustration, and confusion are added to my nightmare. As Charlie attempted to stand, Billy and Eli came to his aid and helped him to his feet. Charlie, maybe this was a bad idea, Billy observed. If you want, we can help you get back to the house and we can leave you in peace. Right now, Charlie responded, I don't know what to think or how to respond. If you guys are right, and I don't think you are, but if you are, I need to listen. I want to wake up from this nightmare. Give me a chance to get myself together, Charlie continued. We came here to fish. Let's not lose that opportunity this afternoon. Eli Speaks, February 24th, 2018. Saturday evening, Cricket's Creek. Charlie opened the conversation as his friends gathered around the campfire on Saturday night. I know that you're trying to help me. I really do. Claire and I have been through a lot over the past 9 years. Trust me when I tell you that I have explored every option to understand why God has allowed me to go through this. Trust me when I tell you that I will do anything to make this pain go away. Charlie, Zach interrupted, we believe the answers are there. No offense, Zach, Charlie stopped him. I promise I will listen to all of you. But first, I need you to listen to me. My issue is not with man. My issue is with God. To be blunt, you don't know the mind of God any more than I do. Can any of you tell me why wicked men prosper? They live to reach old age. They grow rich and powerful. Their homes and families are safe from fear, and God doesn't bring his rod of justice down on them. They openly mock God. They sing and dance in front of him. They have no need for God because prosperity is theirs for the taking. All of us have sinned. All of us fall well short of God's glory. I am no different. But I have worked so hard to live a life that is pleasing to God. Yet, over the past few years, he has destroyed my life and my family. I don't deserve this. Charlie, Billy argued, no man can be right before a righteous God. He makes his place in the heavens. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. Your cry of innocence falls on deaf ears. You have to search your own heart, find the darkness that has caused God's anger, and then deal with it. I might buy that, Billy, Charlie answered. But right now, I see the things that evil men get away with. Although they deserve much worse than me, I don't see God's wrath in their life. The joy of the godless life is only momentary, Zach jumped in. In the long run, his prosperity and possessions will be gone. Even thoughts and actions are like candy on the tongue. But in the end, they turn to venom, and they destroy a man from the inside out. Charlie, you have to examine your own heart, Zach continued. Make absolutely certain that you are not that man. Stop looking at other men and take a look at your own thoughts and actions. What I can't get you to see, Charlie responded, is that I have searched my heart, my thoughts, and my actions, but... Here it comes again, Elliot responded with sarcasm. Another speech proclaiming your innocence. Charlie, God knows your heart. He knows just how black it can be. Have you gained your prosperity on the backs of others? All the so-called good things, Elliot spoke with air quotes, that you claim to have done over the years. Did you do them to impress others or to draw attention to the great Charlie Christian? How many times, Elliot continued, have you withheld charity to someone in need because there was no one there to give you praise? When you serve on your short-term mission trips, do you serve with your heart, or are those just trophies for your display? When you teach, are you there to lead others, or do you just want to show off your knowledge? That's pride, Charlie. Now that the snares are all around you, you cry out for justice, and justice is precisely what you are getting. Charlie, Elliot's voice became firm. You have been lying to yourself so long that even you can't tell the truth from deception. The day of reckoning is here. Agree with God and you will find your peace. Listen to his instruction. Remove the injustice from your own heart. Take it easy, Elliot, Billy stepped in. I think you've made your point. Elliot, Charlie answered in a somber voice. I have searched my heart and still find no answers. Maybe I am blind. Maybe I have deceived myself, as you have suggested. If so, I would hope that God would open my eyes so that I could see what he sees. God's hand is heavy. My pain is real, and he knows it, Charlie continued. If I knew where I could find him, I would present my case to him. I don't believe he will simply shut me down. No, he would listen to me, and in the end, he would acquit me as my righteous judge. I know God is all around me, Charlie's voice was pleading, but I still can't see him or feel his presence. I tried to follow his steps. I have not walked away from the places where he has called me. I read his word, and I treasure it as much or more than anything else. I know he has a plan for all of this, but right now, God has terrified me. I truly dread the next moment, the next hour, the next event he will test me with. Like everyone else, I have sinned and continually fall short of God's glory. Like Isaiah, all of my righteous acts are nothing but filthy rags. I struggle every day to please God. Charlie looked at each of his friends. But there are men who totally rebel against God. There are people who not only do not care about the needy, but who go to great lengths to take advantage of them. They take advantage of the widows and the orphans. Why doesn't God terrorize them the same way he has attacked me? Charlie asked rhetorically. I think you are wrong, Charlie, Billy interceded. God does deal with the wicked. You have to account for your own actions and stop worrying about others. God's ways are beyond our understanding. Charlie ignored Billy's words. He holds the earth in his hands. He takes water and paints a masterpiece with the clouds. He holds them there until he decides to release the rain on the earth. He parted the waters for Moses by his command and caused the storm to be still while his disciples feared for their lives. With those same waters, he delivered Noah and his family from a deadly flood. I see his works, and I am amazed. But in my personal life, I am terrified. The same God who created the world has used his power to make my soul as bitter as vinegar. Charlie looked down at his hands. In your minds, you're convinced of my guilt. But I have searched my heart, and I will hold on to my integrity as long as I can. That is all I have left. Charlie stood up and walked away from the fire. His physical pain was intense, but his emotional and mental pain was tearing him apart. The others were silent as Charlie turned around to speak in a quiet tone. You have no idea how much I wish Claire and I could go back to the life we had before. God seemed to watch over us the same way that a shepherd cares for his lambs. His light was always before me to guide me. Even through the darkest nights, he was always with me. He blessed us with 5 incredible children, and every single one of them became followers of Christ. But then he tore them right out of our arms. In church, people responded to my teaching. I have enjoyed the respect of others in our community. I tried to set an example in ministering to the poor and needy. I have reached out to fatherless children. I have always tried to set a godly example for others. Now, I have only a few true friends. A lot of people who responded to our difficulties at first have now gone about their daily lives. Some even act like we have a contagious plague. They talk about us, but rarely have anything to say to us. Tomorrow, you will go back to your own daily lives while Claire and I continue to deal with this continuing nightmare. God has cast me into a pit. You guys offered to help, but you have turned this conversation into a mindless, relentless persecution. My stomach is in turmoil while I wait for the next round of pain. My skin itches and my joints ache. I have been faithful to my bride and she has been faithful to me. I have been honest to a fault. I have guarded my integrity to avoid becoming a stumbling block to anyone. Where is grace? Where is mercy? Where is justice? Charlie demanded. If I walked where I should not walk, if my eyes have gone where they don't belong, if I have turned away from my integrity, let God deal with me accordingly. If I have rejected the needs of my co-workers or turned away from my neighbor, or turned my back on the poor or homeless, or rejected the needs of someone who is ill, let God's wrath come down on me. Have I placed my trust in material possessions? Have I done anything unethical for monetary gain? If any of those are true, then I deserve to be punished. There is only one who needs to hear me. Charlie was assertive. There is only one who can set things right. Write out your indictments and make your case, but let the Almighty alone answer me. I will gladly give him an account of all my steps. At that point, Charlie dropped to his knees and wept. He had lost all energy. Eli walked over and helped him back to the fire. Charlie was shivering from the cold. As he went to the ground, he could feel his heart beginning to pound, and his breath began to grow shallow. Eli grabbed one of the blankets and wrapped it around Charlie. Eli was not quick-tempered, but he could feel the emotion growing inside. Eli looked at the others. Gentlemen, I kept quiet as long as I could. I am much younger than you and perhaps not as wise and knowledgeable as I should be. But no matter what your purpose was in talking to Charlie, this conversation has been far more painful than it should be. You have not spoken truthfully about Charlie, Eli continued. You have made broad-based assumptions about his character, based on an unbiblical view of evil and suffering. I know this man very well. His life and testimony have been a great source of inspiration for me. He sacrificed a lot to reach into my life and change it from where it was headed. I don't know much about your relationship with Charlie when you were growing up, but I have known him for the past 20 years. You're making a lot of assumptions about a man whom you don't seem to know very well. You make general accusations without any specifics. You are bold enough to act like you are speaking on behalf of God and what is going on in his life. Eli's indignation was unmistakable. You keep telling him that no one goes through a trial or suffering unless he is enduring God's wrath. You are like those prosperity preachers that line their pockets with other people's money by telling them that God owes them a life of health and wealth. Eli continued. Now, son, Elliot interrupted, we are just looking for a way to help Charlie out of this mess. No more, Eli stopped him. You have had your say. I'm not going to let you drive him to the grave. It's time for you to listen. Throughout history, many godly men have suffered. Many have been tortured and martyred for their faith. I don't know how that works in God's economy. I'm certainly not going to speak on his behalf. I know the stories of 12 men who gave their lives to carry the gospel message to the world. they and the people who helped them were persecuted. God wasn't punishing them. No, he had other purposes for allowing their pain. I've heard Charlie say some things to you that, in my opinion, he should not have said. He has declared his innocence, and he has demanded justice. He said that he is willing to stand up to God and demand justice. Eli continued. Instead of answering him on those matters, you persist in your vague allegations. Eli turned to Charlie, who was still quietly staring into the fire, cupping his coffee with both hands. Charlie, I've heard some words out of you that I never expected to hear. Words that contradict what you have taught me over the years. Charlie, neither one of us is more than a piece of clay that God used to create us. You say that you're innocent. You say that you are pure. You have said that God has counted you as his enemy and that he has shackled you in some sort of prison. Eli's face showed compassion while his words were instructive. Charlie, Eli continued, I don't have to tell you that you are not right. You already know that. You are fighting God. You have said that he refuses to hear your voice. God has many ways of speaking to us in our experiences, but mostly through his word. You, of all people, know and understand that. Right now, the words of these men, combined with the pain and grief screaming at you from the inside your mind and body. Charlie, they are so loud right now. You can't possibly hear God's voice above the noise. Charlie, you know how much I love you and how much I appreciate you for what you have done in my life. Eli's eyes began to water with his compassion. God has a purpose for allowing things to come into your life. I have no wisdom to speak on his behalf, and neither do these men, who, regardless of their motive, have accused you without cause. I truly want to answer your questions. I would love to make all of this go away. Eli turned to the others. Charlie has complained that there is no profit for a man who takes delight in the Lord, but he knows better. Nothing from God is wicked. In time, God will repay wicked men for what they have done. That is true justice, and God will never pervert justice. God's eyes are on the ways of man, Eli continued. Nothing can be hidden from him. He knows their thoughts and their works. When they turn away from him, he strikes them down. But he does this on his own time, not according to our desires and expectations. Do you remember the story of Lazarus and the rich man? Do you remember how the rich man treated Lazarus while they were both alive? In his death, the tables were turned, and the rich man was begging for mercy from Lazarus. Both men received their justice in God's timing. You have demanded that Charlie turn his life around for offenses that you can't even name. Who do you know that has ever kept a promise to God? As Christians, we make resolutions to change our ways, and we go out the next day and fall flat on our faces. That's why we call it grace and mercy. Eli turned his attention back to Charlie. My friend, please don't cry out to God for justice. Please don't forget that you are the one who taught me that truth. You can't stand defiant before a holy God. I can't say that God is punishing you for any grievous sin, but we all have fallen short. His grace and love are the only things we have to hold on to. Like Elijah, your own righteousness is worthless. You are a righteous man only because of Christ. Eli stood up and took a deep breath. I know I am preaching. I am exhausted with this conversation, but I have heard so much coming out of your mouths that I can't remain silent. But God is almighty in power. He is eternally wise, knowing the end of all things from the beginning. We can't understand his ways. His justice is perfect, even when we can't understand it. Charlie knows Christ. He does not have a place among evildoers. God allows trials and adversities, even among those who follow him faithfully. Charlie, God has not taken his eyes off of your struggle. He never withdraws his eyes from those who have accepted his son. Don't allow your pain to take you into a dark place. Don't let the words of your friends force you into saying things that you know are not true. God often uses adversity to open our eyes and ears. Seek refuge in him. Continue to praise him, even in your pain. He is not finished with you, Charlie. Eli pleaded with him. Sometimes God speaks to us in the rain and the snow. Sometimes he speaks in the lightning, the storms, the thunder, and the darkness. Charlie, stop and consider God's wondrous works. As Eli finished speaking, he walked over and put his hand on Charlie's shoulder. I love you so much, Charlie. Charlie reached up and placed his hand over Eli's and softly whispered, You are so right, Eli. I seem to have forgotten a lot, haven't I? No one sitting by the fire had anything to say for the next several minutes. Charlie was still shivering from the chills brought on by his condition. He was struggling to breathe as he remembered that his doctor had told him about the impact that stress could have on his condition. Finally, Elliot broke the silence. Charlie, I am sorry. You have a wise friend in Eli here. We could all learn something from him. Billy echoed Elliot's words. You can say that again. Charlie, you don't look well. Do we need to get you back to the house tonight? Charlie whispered his response. I'll be all right. Just give me a few minutes. His voice trailed off. He struggled to remain conscious, but his body would not let him. As he slumped over, Eli reached over to lay him out on the ground, covering him with another blanket. Guys, we have to get him to the hospital. Eli's voice expressed urgency. One of you call Claire and tell her we are on the way. She can get a paramedic to meet us on the road. Zach, let's get him on the mule. I will grab his horse and we will follow. We can come back in the morning to get our gear. They were almost to the house by the time the paramedics got to him. Charlie was still unconscious. This was not the first time Charlie had been picked up by these same paramedics. They were familiar with his disease and were quick to administer care on the way to the hospital. Mercy Hospital, Sunday afternoon, February 25th, 2018. It was mid-afternoon when Charlie regained consciousness at Mercy Hospital. Claire, Eli Hawks, Pastor Pete Kelsey, Heartland Community Church, and Billy Schumann were at his bedside. You gave us quite a scare this time, Pastor Pete commented. Charlie was still in a fog. I feel like I've been run over by a bull. The last thing I remember, I was sitting by fire at Cricket's Creek. I must have blacked out. You scared me to death, Charlie, Eli explained. When you passed out, your vital signs were so low, we thought we were going to lose you. Where are Zach and Elliot? Charlie asked. They were here all night, Billy answered. They are back at their hotel. I think their flights back home are scheduled for late this afternoon. They did not want to leave until you were out of the woods. Claire, I'm so sorry. Charlie looked at his bride. I guess I pushed her too hard again. Doc warned me. I should have come back to the house long before I let this happen. Yeah, you really should have, Claire answered. But I've been living long enough to know that you are not afraid to push the limits. At that moment, a familiar figure stuck his head in the door. Brother Doug. Charlie's face lit up. Come on in and sit for a while. I can't stay, Charlie, Doug responded. I've got some other matters to attend to today. I just wanted to make sure you are all right. You're in good hands with Pastor Pete here. Just know that I am praying for you. I will stop by a little later this afternoon. Looks like Brother Doug is not his usual self, Charlie observed. At that point, Billy excused himself. Charlie, I'm going to get with Zach and Elliot. Let them know you are recovering. I'm sure they will want to stop back by before they get out of town. I guess we all got a first-hand look at what this disease is doing to you. It's been quite a ride, Charlie managed to chuckle. But I'm not a quitter. You and the boys get on out of here. We still have some more fishing to do. I need to run too, Charlie, Eli spoke up. I will be in town for the next few days. Claire knows how to reach me if something happens. Otherwise, I will plan to come by tomorrow and check on you. I hope I can get out of this joint by then, Charlie responded. Not so fast, cowboy, Eli grinned. I don't think they're going to cut you loose that quickly. Claire put her arms around Eli. Eli, you are a godsend. Charlie and I are so proud of you. You being here at his side means more to him and me than you'll ever know. As Eli walked out, Pastor Pete and Claire were the only ones remaining in the room. The following morning, the nurses were preparing Charlie's discharge papers with instructions for his home care when Pastor Pete walked into the room. Charlie, last night we received some really bad news. With all that has been going on, I did not want to add anything to your pain. It's Jack, isn't it? Charlie interrupted. There's a reason he has not been here to see me. What happened? And how serious is it? Charlie, Jack had a heart attack last night, Pete answered. I'm afraid he didn't make it. Charlie stared at his pastor without showing any emotion. He was in a deep state of shock. The tears were building behind his eyes, but he wasn't able to release them. Claire reached over to take Charlie's hand, but he pulled it away. Charlie looked at Pete and quietly whispered, Jack is my best friend. God can't take him away from me. Charlie, Pete began, but Charlie cut him off. You know, Pete, when many people turn their eyes away from our problems, Jack stood beside us. I could not have made it without him. He stammered. You can't possibly know. Charlie wasn't able to finish his words. How's Rita? Claire asked. Is there anything we can do for her? You can probably imagine, Pete answered. This was a pretty big shock for her. There will be plenty to do in the weeks ahead. Right now, we've got people from the church looking after her. Jack, February 27th, 2018, Tuesday afternoon. Jack's funeral was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Charlie was resting comfortably in the living room at Shiloh, so Claire decided to take the afternoon and spend it with Rita and a few other ladies from the church. Charlie was exhausted from the weekend that culminated in another hospital visit. He was sitting by the fire in his living room, reflecting on the relationship he and Jack had built over their 40-year friendship. As his mind began to take inventory, Bandit walked into the room and took his place on the floor at Charlie's feet. Bandit, I'm exhausted, Charlie began. With everything we've been through, it's just not a good time to have to bury your best friend. Charlie managed to chuckle. I think I was 17 when I first met Jack. He had just purchased the Lone Wolf Ranch across the road. He didn't know much about running a ranch, but he was determined to make it work. It's a beautiful ranch now, but you should have seen it when he first bought it. It was pretty worn down from years of neglect, but he saw the natural resources on the property and saw it for what it could become. Dad and I thought he was a bit crazy. We went over to visit him on the day he moved in. Dad offered to help him any way he could, and Jack was so grateful for the offer. I'll never forget him telling us about his business degree from Wichita State, Charlie mused. He worked on a ranch to help pay for his education, and when he finished, he decided that a corner office in a business high-rise just couldn't compare with the life of a rancher. Can you imagine Jack in a business suit? Charlie managed to laugh. It didn't take him long to figure out that running a ranch was a lot different from working on one. Dad and I shared a lot of laughs over some of the decisions he made in the early years, but Jack refused to give up, and Dad admired him for that. One thing about Jack that always amazed me was that he didn't have an ego. He was smart, but he was eager to learn. I think that's what made Dad want to help him along the way. They were friends for 20 years before Dad died. It's kind of ironic when you think about it, Charlie reflected. In many ways, Dad was Jack's mentor, Over the years, Jack was like a mentor to me in so many ways. Jack turned out to be an excellent rancher. More than that, he was a great friend. We helped each other so much over the years. Neither of us kept score. If a need arose for either of us, the other responded without hesitation. "Are you sad, Granddaddy?" Charlie looked around at the voice behind him. It was his oldest granddaughter, Hannah. "Hey, sweetheart," Charlie answered. "Come on around and sit with me for a while. I'm sure Bandy won't mind." Hannah took her place under Charlie's arm. Looking up at Charlie, she whispered, "I love you, Granddaddy." "I'm all right," Charlie answered. "I've just been thinking about my best friend. I'm going to miss him. We all are going to miss him. But you know, Hannah, Papa Jack is smiling down on us from heaven right now. Do you know how I know that?" "Because Jesus was in his heart?" Hannah responded. "That's right. But he was my buddy, and I still wish he was here. I'm sad because I'm going to miss him, but I know that I will see him again." Charlie kissed Hannah on the forehead as she snuggled up close to her granddaddy. The funeral, March 2nd, 2018, Friday afternoon. When Jack Graham first arrived at Heartland Community, he had just met Dave and Charlie Christian. He arrived on a Friday and came to church on that Sunday at the invitation, some might say a little arm twisting was involved, at the encouragement of Dave Christian. Brother Doug began his eulogy. That year was 1977. Jack would be the first to tell you that he was a marginal Christian at best back then, but he had a servant's heart. Jack never did anything half-hearted. Over the next nearly 40 years, Jack was always available for any ministry project that we undertook as a congregation. On a personal note, he was a good friend. He will be sorely missed. As the service continued, Charlie remained quietly still. Just when he thought his problems couldn't get any worse, God had taken his best friend. Consumed with his own pain and grief, Charlie fought hard to focus on Brother Doug's message. But Charlie also knew Brother Doug as a pastor and as a friend of his own family. When he first got here, he didn't know a lot about running a ranch, Brother Doug continued. His neighbors cared at him a lot during the early years. One thing that I learned about Jack during our entire relationship was that he was always able to laugh at himself. He could take some ribbon, but he also knew how to dish it out when the time was right. As the funeral continued, Brother Doug turned his attention away from the lighthearted stories and focused on his message on the gospel. Friends, I could sit here all week and talk about Jack, but if he were here today, he would say, "Come on, Doug, let's get to the important stuff." You see, Jack was a faithful follower of Jesus Christ. He was a sinner just like you and me. But Jack did not place his faith in so-called good deeds. It was Jesus who claimed the eternal soul of Jack Graham. Jack was not a good guy waiting for his eternal reward. He was a sinner in need of a Savior. The Bible tells us that all of us, you, me, Jack, and others, we all fall short of God's glory. We deserve to spend eternity in hell. But God loved us so much, he sent his son to live a perfect life and to die a horrible death on a Roman cross. Jesus paid the price so we could spend a perfect eternity with him. God requires only one thing. Place your faith and trust in Christ as Savior and Lord. Jack did just that. Friends, if you have already placed your trust in Jesus, you will see Jack again. If you have not, Jack Graham would stand here and say to you, "What are you waiting for?" Rita, there are no words to say that will silence the grief you're experiencing right now. Just know, from everything I know about your husband, your fellow ran the race and he finished strong. Well done, my good and faithful friend. Well done. Brother Doug finished with a prayer and an invitation to an afternoon meal in the church's fellowship hall. Doug escorted Rita back to her vehicle as everyone turned to leave. Charlie was standing alone by the grave with Claire on his arm. There were no tears and no words to speak. Pastor Pete walked back to Charlie with an envelope in his hands. "Charlie, Jack left a letter for you. You can open it whenever you are ready. You know, Jack really loved you. If I can do anything for you, please, please, Charlie, let me help." At that, Charlie answered quietly, "Thanks, Pete. I can't look at it right now." Charlie folded the envelope and shoved it into his pocket. As the others were driving away, Charlie caught up with Brother Doug. "Brother Doug, I need help in a bad way. I have no more strength in me. Would you spend some time with me? Would you help me sort all of this out?" "You know I will, Charlie," Brother Doug responded. "Why don't we set some time aside early next week? I can come by your house, or you can come to mine." "Thanks," was the only word Charlie could find. Following Jack's funeral, everyone was invited to the fellowship hall at Heartland Community Church. Charlie was hardly in the mood for polite discussion, but as one of the pallbearers and Jack's closest friend, he knew that he needed to be there for the reception. Members of Heartland had gone to great lengths to prepare food for the occasion. At Claire's insistence, Charlie prepared a bowl of banana pudding and took a seat alone at one of the corner tables. "Hey, Charlie, mind if we sit with you?" The voice was that of Pete Kelsey, with a stranger he wanted to introduce. "Charlie, this is Brian Seegers. He was one of Jack's friends from Wichita State. Pleased to meet you." Charlie's voice was less than enthusiastic. "I apologize, but I'm not going to be much company today." "I understand," Brian responded. "Pete tells me that you and Jack were very close." At that moment, Chris Waters and Brother Doug approached the table. "Got room for an old preacher?" Doug inquired. "So, Brian, you and Jack were at Wichita together?" Charlie asked. "We were fraternity brothers," Brian responded. "But we haven't seen each other much over the years, but we do keep in touch. Jack told me about a friend he has up here, and he regularly asked me to pray for him. He never gave me his name, but Pete seems to think you're the man I've been praying for all these years." Charlie managed to smile. "Leave it to Jack. So, Brother Doug, what's your story? How did you get in the ministry, and what's your connection with Jack?" Brian asked. "You're asking an open-ended question like that to an old preacher?" Chris laughed. "We might be here for a while." "Easy now, Chris. You got two preachers at the table," Pete answered, "and neither of us has on a watch." Doug laughed as he began telling his story. "As I recall, I met Jack when he moved up here from Wichita. Charlie, you were still a teenager, as I recall." "Yes, sir," Charlie answered. "I was 17 when Dad and I went over to Jack's ranch to introduce ourselves. Anyway, the following Sunday, Dave, that's Charlie's dad, brought Jack to our church. Jack was already a Christian, but he had not been active in the church in a while. Dave had a way with people. In no time, he had Jack involved in a number of ways." "So you are the one who started this church?" Brian asked. "Well, I was the first pastor here," Doug responded. "But there were several good men who started this church, not the least of which were Dave Christian and his father, Slim. In fact, Dave was the one who encouraged me to get the church started right after I got out of seminary. Although we didn't know each other at the time, Dave and I served in Korea around the same time." "When did you feel like God was calling you to the ministry?" Brian asked. "It was after I returned from Korea in 1953, Doug answered. "As a young man, I wanted to be a pilot. I enlisted in the Navy in 1949 at the age of 19 and began taking flying lessons in my spare time. When I returned home, I reconnected with Beth, my high school girlfriend. We got married. I felt like God was calling me to ministry, so I enrolled in seminary at Manhattan Christian College. I bought myself a de Havilland Tiger Moth. That's an old biplane equipped for dust cropping, and made a living serving farms in the area. Beth went to work in an insurance agency, and by God's grace, we made it work. I'd met Dave Christian one evening at a town hall meeting. I found out that he had also served in Korea, and his father had served in World War II. He and a couple of other men were discussing the need for a more gospel-centered church in town. He started laying the groundwork, and a little over a year later, we had our first service in the elementary school lunchroom. "Charlie, why don't you tell us about your grandfather?" Doug asked. "Well, my grandfather on Dad's side of the family," Charlie began, "was James Christian. Everybody called him Slim. He was born on October 16th, 1906, and my dad was born on Grandpa's 24th birthday in 1930. Grandpa Slim didn't become a Christian until much later in life, but he was a good man. He dropped out of school to join the Army at Fort Riley in 1924. He met my grandma in Junction City while he was there. They got married in 1929, and my dad was born a year later. During World War II, Grandpa Slim served in North Africa with the Big Red One. He was involved in the invasion of Sicily and was wounded in the Battle of Gela. He brought a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star home from a war that he didn't like to talk about. It was just a short time after that," Charlie continued, "Grandpa watched his own son being shipped out to Korea. Dad was overseas when Grandpa started saving money and putting together a plan to buy a small piece of land that would eventually become the ranch I grew up on," Charlie concluded. "Slim learned everything from the school of hard knocks," Doug interjected. "World War II made him tough. He was physically strong. He was a no-nonsense type of person, with a vocabulary that could be a bit salty, and an affinity for Scotch whiskey and unfiltered Lucky Strike cigarettes. But Slim Christian, you didn't have to ask where you stood. He never came across as a warm and loving man, but he was a good husband and father. He eventually lost his battle with COPD and lung cancer in 1988. Slim was more than willing to get involved when we first opened the church," Doug explained. "But it would be a couple more years before he accepted Christ. That was a great day." Doug led this church through its formation and many years of growth. Pete chimed in. "I'm so privileged to be able to take the reins of a really dynamic, gospel-centered church. Brother Doug claims to have retired in 2005, but he is as active as any minister that I'm aware of. He still makes his hospital visits and leads several Bible studies every week."
That concludes part 6 of Charlie's story. In part 7, God answers from the whirlwind.